Today, I'm joined by Giles Membrey. Giles is the managing director and owner of Rioja Estates, which is the leading UK-based specialist in the development of designer and factory outlets. So welcome, Giles.
Welcome. Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me on to this podcast.
No, thank you for
I have
joining
to say
us.
it's the first one I think I've ever done, but
There's a
hopefully,
first time.
hopefully people will find it interesting.
Well, I'm sure they will, and
Yeah.
and thank you for joining us. So Giles, look, to start off with, just tell us a little bit more about Rioja Estates, what it is that you do.
So Rioja Estates was set up as a promoter developer of outlet centres across Europe, by the way. So we work in all different parts of Europe. And our business model is sometimes we'll get contacted by landowners because they know who we are. We've built up a reputation. Sometimes we will go to a market where we've recognized a gap in the market for an outlet center. And we will identify particular sites around the city. We have a criteria in terms of size of site, wanting to build a certain critical mass, and then the first port of call is to get a catchment analysis specialist involved, who will then work with us on a particular location and then a particular site to look at the density of population within 30, 60, 90 minutes, and then to look at particular sites in terms of size of site and what that site would potentially do from a sales density point of view. So just go back one area some people might not understand. So Designer Outlet Village is like Ashford or Bicester Village, which most people know about. So they are fashion brands selling goods at a minimum 30% discount. And when they first started, it was very much seconds, last year's goods that didn't sell at the either in the department store, wholesale, or in their shops in sort of Bond Street or Regent Street, etc. In the old days, and this will shock some people, a lot of the brands would actually burn their goods because they don't want them getting into the wrong hands. There's a certain style, there's a certain quality about how people like Polo Ralph Lauren or Boss, etc., or Furler or Coach sell their goods. And they don't want those goods to get into the wrong hands. In some cases, back in the 70s, some of the goods, they'd rip out the labels and you'd find them in a Bangkok market or a Hong Kong market selling at a massive discount. What happened during the 70s in the USA is they started developing these outlet centers, and then suddenly the brands realized they were actually making profit from selling this distressed stock and still being able to control the sale of that stock. So that's how outlets developed, and I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time back in 1991, where we had a planning consent for a traditional shopping centre in Swindon, just south of Swindon town centre. It was an old engineering building, Brunel, for when he designed, developed bridges, etc., etc. So it was a big warehouse, which we had to keep because that was listed. And the market, as I said, was not good for full price. So I did a bit of studying. I went to America for 3 or 4 weeks, came back, and we decided that an outlet centre would work. Now, outlets aren't brand new to the UK, because if you go back to the 1800s, in a lot of the manufacturing plants, particularly potteries around Stoke, they would often have a factory shop for the employees who could pick up seconds or goods that just didn't sell. The idea was building this purpose-built shopping environment of quality for the brands to dispose of goods. And in some cases, they test new lines. And in other cases, more recently, they're actually making goods for the outlet. And the outlet has become, in some cases, the most profitable part of the brand's multi-channel distribution.
Interesting.
And since COVID, we are seeing an average of 12 to 15% increase in sales density.
Yeah.
And the other big thing I would say, and that's slightly controversial, is that the relationship between the brand and the landlord in an outlet is very much a partnership, and it has led how people like Westfield now deal with their big shopping centres and how they manage brands within their shopping centres, because it's based on turnover. So a brand might pay a small base rent, but it's all about turnover. Therefore, it's all about footfall, and it's all about converting that footfall into pounds and pence. And then the brand is on a percentage of turnover. So it's much more of a partnership between the brand and the landlord. And in some cases, you know, if the brands aren't performing well, you can work with the brand. Maybe the unit is too big. Maybe it's in the wrong location for the outlet centre. So there's a much greater collaboration is the key between the brand and the landlord. And I really got excited about outlets following the work I did back in the early 90s. So we then set about looking at new outlet centres around Europe. And I've been lucky enough to be involved in sort of 15 to 20 centres. And we would start off, as I said, going back to our business model, is site identification. We then appoint the professional team. So the architect, planning consultant, highways, noise consultant, you name it. I mean, in any one scheme, we can have 30 to 40 consultants working for us. And we then build up the planning application, making the case for the outlet in that particular location. We'll secure the planning consent, then we'll set about doing the detailed tender design so that we can go out to contractors and get the pricing and the costs fixed. At the same time, we're doing pre-leasing for the anchor stores, sort of somewhere between 35–40% of floor space. And that process can take anything from 5 to 7 years. And can cost anything from, well, anything from sort of £3.5 to £7 million to run those costs through in terms of the consultants and the leasing and everything else. So once we've got all the authority consents, all the off-site works costed, programmed and ready to go, we've got a building contract, fixed price with indexation with a reputable contractor, and we've pre-let it 35 to 40%, then we'll go out to the funding market, to the pension funds, the institutions, get them to back us, and then we'll start on site and they'll fund the costs. Just to give you an idea, first phase of our schemes tends to be around 200,000 square feet, and then we'll build it up to possibly somewhere around 300 to 350,000 over a number of phases. And first phase alone will cost anything between 100 and 120 million pounds sterling to build and cost. So they're big schemes.
Absolutely. Thank you for that detailed explanation.
Yep.
I appreciate that, Giles. Thank you for that. And look, let's say a couple of things I'm interested in. What made you start your own business, Giles? Why did you decide to set up your own business doing what you've just explained?
Well, I first started doing B&Q developments in Northern Ireland because no one else was doing it. And I was an agent for B&Q site finding. And then I suddenly thought, actually, I can do this. I can develop these B&Qs. I don't necessarily need to be just an agent. So I raised some money, found the first site, bought the site conditionally, let the building contract and funded it. My first ever scheme I funded with the PRU. So I'm going back to what I was saying to you, I think before we started. I had my sandwich just before I went to Trent Polytechnic, it was in those days. I did a year out between school, which was Skinner's and Tunbridge Wells, and Trent Poly at the Prudential in London. And so I went back to the PRU, people who I knew, and secured a deal with them without going out to the market. It was a deal that was good for them, but it was also good for me. It de-risked the whole project, had a fixed building contract, bought the land, having raised a bit of money, and then developed the B&Q, which we won an award for. So B&Q were delighted. And then on the back of that, I formed a JV company with a guy called Trevor Turkington's in Northern Ireland, and we built a whole load of B&Qs and retail parks. So that's how I started. I'm
interested to think about, why did you start? So
I wanted to do more than just work.
Was it something you always wanted to do? Was it to make more money? Was it because why did you go, right, I'm going to do this myself?
There's more risk, but there's also more money.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
there's a lot more risk, obviously, because you're putting your own money into sites and legal fees and cost, etc. But it's much more exciting for me to be part of the whole process.
I think.
So
Yeah.
from site finding all the way through to completing the development,
Yeah.
rather than just being an agent. I'm not saying that agent is an important part of the process, but I wanted to be part of the whole thing. And
So
that's why I started on my own to get involved from right at front end all the way through to the completion of the scheme. And now we get involved, for instance, taking it one step further with the outlet centres, we get involved in the management, the operations, the setup, the tenant handbooks, the marketing budgets, the service charge budgets. That's a whole ream of things that we work with. I've got people I work with. I don't do it all myself, obviously,
yeah. No, yeah.
but I like it. I like the fact that you can see something that was a piece of green field, and you've taken it all the way through to actually being a centre, an outlet centre. And that has created anything between 1,000 to 1,500 jobs. So that's a big plus. And you've put something back into the community. So with our West Midlands Designer Outlet Village, which is the latest one we developed, which opened on April the 12th, 2021, the day after COVID finished.
Yeah.
And that has completely transformed Cannock, which was, fairly high unemployment in Cannock. The town centre was fairly run down. And we have produced something that is attracting over 3 to 3.5 million visitors a year and has created 1,500 plus jobs. And they're about to start on phase 2. And it's something that has not competed with anything locally in terms of the quality of the brands. We've got Boss and Lacoste and Gant and Coach, etc. Those aren't brands that you'd have seen in Cannock, and it's bringing people to the area. So if you talk to the council, I'm not saying it's the best thing that's happened to Cannock in the last 100 years, but it is a fairly significant benefit to the town and the area.
Certainly up there as one of the big things. So look, something you mentioned earlier was about the relationship between the brand and the owner of the outlet. How important are those relationships in business, Giles, from your opinion?
Oh, absolutely vital.
Yeah.
You've got to develop that relationship between the brand and the landlord, because at the end of the day, it's the brand's trading and the success of that brand's trading that is generating the rental income, and it's the rental income that's generating the gross development value of the centre, which is how you can afford to build it in the first place. So I think the reason why outlets have been so successful is because the landlord has worked with the brand to generate the footfall to the centre. So if you think about it, because it's on a turnover related rental income, as a landlord, you'll put some of your own money into marketing, because it's all about marketing. It's about marketing that centre, both locally, nationally, and even internationally, in airports and things like that, because an outlet's very much on a tourist sort of destination for a lot of people. And as a landlord, you'll be happy to put your own money in. So let's say you put a £1 million of money into the marketing of that centre, which will improve the footfall, which improves the footfall means you're improving the conversion rate and therefore the pounds and pence that people are spending. And if the brand is on, say, a 10% turnover rent, then you're going to improve your rental income. Improving your rental income increases your capital value of your asset. And that's why it's so much more collaborative between the brand and the landlord, and why that's important. Brilliant. And for the brand, it's important as well, because the brand needs to help. Sometimes you need to help the brand. Is it oversized? Is it undersized? Is it in the right location? And the advantage with outlets is you can move people around quite quickly and with a certain amount of flexibility. All the leases are outside the Landlord and Tenant Act, and I won't go into the technical detail, but it means you don't have the landlord and tenant traditional rights, and that works both ways. It's flexible for the brand, but it's also flexible for the landlord.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Thank you. No, that's no, and I agree. I think sort of relationships, not
yeah,
not just in the industry that you're in, but in every industry between the whether it be the client and the supplier or whoever it may be, those
yeah.
strong relationships are so important. And look, what from your opinion, Giles,
Mm,
what would you say makes a successful business?
that's a good question. um, well, from our point of view, I suppose it's understanding the market, understanding what your end game is in terms of what you're trying to build, what you're trying to develop, and is it in the right location? Those sort of things. Is it the right sort of size? Because critical mass for an outlet is really important. You need to be of a certain size to pull your customer to the location. So, for instance, give you an example locally. Let's take Ashford Designer Outlet Village, okay, which is very successful. They've just done a phase 2, which opened about 18 months ago, post-COVID, and the scheme is trading significantly better on the back of phase 2. And that's because you've created more brands. More brands means that when people wake up in the morning and think, right, what am I going to do today? They're more likely to go to Ashford because they've got more choice. They've got more brands to shop at, and it becomes a much bigger and better opportunity for them.
Yeah,
If there was just one store at Ashford, you wouldn't drive an hour and a half to go to one store, but you will for 140 stores.
yeah.
So critical
My
mass is
wife
important.
certainly does. Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, understanding your customer, understanding the market, um, being able to manage lots of different streams as well. I mean, in any one time, we may have 5 or 6 different projects on the go at any one time, hopefully in different phases of development, because if they're all at the same phase, that would make life quite difficult. Understanding, as I say, come back to things like location criteria, getting on with people in local markets. I've worked in Hungary, I've worked in Bratislava, I've worked in France a lot, I've worked in Germany, I've done a scheme which I've just funded in Malmo, which is the Malmo Designer Outlet Village, which we've literally just funded. We just started on site. So I've had to understand different cultures as well, working in different climate, in different areas. So that's quite a challenge. Making sure you understand how different people work in different areas, and that's key. A little example: in Sweden, they have the whole of July off. Don't
Right.
try to do anything in July. You can, but you'll be working uphill. You
Yeah.
won't get anywhere, and you just got to accept it.
Yeah.
July is their month off.
Okay.
And so it's cultural things like that that you need to work with people. I'm very lucky, and we are lucky as a country, that most people around you will speak English. That is lucky.
We're
That's a
lucky, but
massive.
also very lazy as well. But
We are lazy, but that's a massive plus, that I can get understood in, whether I'm in Budapest, Greece, Spain, Portugal, or Sweden. People talk English, so that's a big plus for us.
so Giles, I've got a question that I like to ask everybody that joins this podcast, and that is this: what is the best advice that you would give to an 18-year-old you?
That's very interesting as well.
Mhm.
Right, best advice. I think to get experience, so get to work with some of the big firms. It's interesting. My eldest son is also a surveyor like me, chartered surveyor. He's far brighter than me. He's also qualified lawyer as well as a surveyor, and he is working in business. He's a development director in London, and he's getting that experience working for that big firm. There would be absolutely no point in him coming to work for me. Maybe in the future, maybe in 5, 10, 15 years time, but you need that experience. Get to work with a reputable company, get some experience behind you. That's the first thing. Second thing is And one of the things that concerns me a little bit with the younger generation, so people starting out, there is no substitute for face-to-face meetings. Okay, Teams call, I know we're on a Zoom call now, fine, but there is no substitute for face-to-face meetings, because you get an awful lot out of a meeting just by turning up, having a coffee. So I, at least once a week, will have face-to-face meetings in London. And in fact, most of our project meetings on Malmo are in Malmo on a monthly basis, and they're all face-to-face, because you will get more around the meeting. You might have gone there to talk about one thing, but on the way in to talk about the one thing, you'll actually then have other things being talked about, and knowledge that you'll pick up, which you may not have picked up on a Teams call. One concern I do have is that people need to be in an office environment at least 3 days a week. And I'm slightly concerned that a lot of people, youngsters, certainly the under 30s, are very happy just working from home because of what happened at COVID. And I understand that we all had to work from home, but I'm a little bit worried that people are still working from home and not interacting with your other people, because you will get a lot more out of your business environment, because things feed off other people. You might go and have a coffee with someone in the kitchen and suddenly find out something you never have found out on a Teams call. So that worries me a little bit, that future generations coming through seem to think they can do everything in an isolated location, talking into a computer.
I agree, and I think it's getting that right mix. It's getting the, there's a time and place for Zoom or Teams. There's a time and place for working from home.
I agree.
And there's also a time and place very much for face-to-face meetings, working in a work environment. It's getting the balance right. So
getting that and getting communication. Communication is absolutely paramount in any organization. And if you're not communicating with people and interacting with people in a face-to-face environment, I think you're going to find it very difficult to be at your best in terms of communication. And I think that's another issue. So for the 18-year-old coming in, I would say get as much experience as you can in whatever field you're in, work for some big reputable companies and get that experience. And then when you've sort of established what you really want to do within that business, within that environment, because if you're a chartered surveyor, you could do offices, you could do industrial, you could do residential, you could do professional work, lease renewals, rent reviews, you could do leasing, you could do investment work, you could do development work like me. So there's a whole range of potential work streams that you could do. So establish where you feel most comfortable. What do you enjoy doing? The other thing I'd say is enjoy what you do. If you don't enjoy what you do, move on, because you're going to spend, in some cases, 70, 80 hours a week working, and you're going to do it for 40 years. So just make sure you enjoy it, because if you're not enjoying it, and I enjoy every single day, there are 1-2 days I don't enjoy quite so much, but mostly I enjoy every single day. And that's, you need to make sure you enjoy what you do, because you'll spend a lot of your life working.
Well, look, Giles, there's a number of things that I've picked up from speaking to you today, but one of the main things that's resonated with me is actually building a business is very much the same as building or developing a property. You mentioned there about getting the marketing right, having understanding what you're actually building, understanding your market, getting the location right, building strong relationships. So actually that development, understanding the customer, getting the work streams right, building that or developing that building is very much the same as building a business. So I think
absolutely. And there's the old saying, Simon, you probably heard it, you're only as good as the last deal that you did.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've got to move on to the next one. So you've got to keep going and keep moving forward. In my business, you want to have at least 5 or 6 projects at any one time, hopefully not all in the same sort of program, the different stages of that development process. So you might have, one is site finding, one is preparing the planning application, one is your funding, one is your on site, one is you're nearly finished on site and you're about to open it. You don't want them all in the same position, although that doesn't always help. I mean, and the other thing you need is patience.
Yes.
So to give you an example, I worked on a project just outside Geneva on the French side. It took us 17 years to get the planning consent.
Wow. Yeah.
And that is patience. You need patience. You need to sometimes take a very deep breath before you go in to see a local authority and find it kicked the can down the road again.
Yeah.
But those are the sort of things that you've just got to have that patience to do.
Very, very important point there.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, look, Giles, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and sharing more about, your business and also your journey. So, Giles, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Simon. Thanks for inviting me, and look forward to hopefully meeting up with you again very soon.
Likewise.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Take care. Cheers. Bye.